tell you my story. I, like Ken, grew up in the same kind of church that only met once a month, and we didn't have a youth group or Sunday school. So, but I was saved at age 14, and it wasn't long until I lost my path as a Christian. When I was in the 9th grade, I started dating a guy, and we dated until the 11th, till I was in the 11th grade. He was actually going into college. We broke up, and I started just dating random people, and nothing serious though. But here's where my real story starts. I met Greg. He was a little older, well, a good bit older than I was, and a lot rougher than I was. Greg was involved in drinking, and he was involved in drugs. I had drank in the past. I never participated in drugs, and still didn't, even when he and I dated. I would drink though, just to join in, because if you're at a party and that's what our relationship was pretty much based on, then you kind of do that just to fit in, and it was really a bad deal. Not long after we started dating, our relationship became very possessive. He didn't want to go out one night, so I went with a cousin of mine, and he found out, and he jerked me out of the car and pushed me up against the car door. And so that continued, and I stayed in the relationship. I didn't get out of the relationship at that time. I was caught up in a web, and definitely out of my league, something I was never accustomed to, but something I could not find myself getting out of. And I know you can't understand that, but he would, in turn, be very sweet and be very kind and say things that I needed and wanted to hear, and so I stayed in the relationship with him. And so then it wasn't long until the violence continued, but then it also turned sexual. So I was scared, and I never discussed any of the violence with anybody. My sister probably knew, but she knew my dad would probably hurt the boy really bad if he ever found out. So we kind of kept it to ourselves. And one night he had too much to drink, and probably was high, but I didn't know what people on drugs normally acted like, because I had never participated or been around that. But he was completely out of control, and the sex got out of control that night. And like I said, I was scared, and I did whatever he asked, always, because I feared for my life. And when he finally decided to leave that night, I decided I didn't care if I died or if I lived, because I couldn't take any more of what I had been put through. And I decided that I would stop seeing him, and I finally got the courage up and told him I wouldn't see him any longer. But it was too late. I was already pregnant. And so I would forever be connected to this man that I was scared to absolute death of. And I feared for my life. I feared for my family's life. And he and I never spoke again. I would see him, and I would be continuously scared and constantly looking over my shoulder. That was in February when all of that took place, and the following November, I was a senior in high school, and I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I was still scared. My parents at this time knew what had taken place, and they never left me alone. My sisters never left me alone. Somebody was always with me. So here I am, 18 years old. I'm unmarried. At this point, I'm not even dating anybody. I was still in high school. And I had a newborn baby. And the church that I had joined when I was 14 gently calls me and tells me that if I want to continue to be a member at that church, that I need to take my letter out of the church or make an acknowledgement for my sin to the congregation. So I chose to take my letter out of the church at that time. And I still attended church at different places with my parents. We would go to church. But I still was not active in church at the time. So I had a friend come by one day, and she said, I've got this guy I want you to meet. I said, he's a lot of fun. We have a great time when we're together. He goes to church. And I said, wait a minute. I said, there is not a decent guy on the face of this earth going to want to date me because I've had a baby. I mean, you don't do stuff like that. I knew what path I had laid out for myself by the choices that I had made. And it wasn't to have anybody that was decent. And again, I was held captive. I was a prisoner this time by Satan's lies instead of by somebody. And so, but my friend and God had a different plan for me. And so I met my husband, Ken, and 23 years later, he's still the love of my life. And he accepted me and loved me, and he accepted my daughter as his from the very moment. Nothing ever changed in our relationship. We were married in 1992, and he actually adopted Allie that following January. So she is legally his, and he loves her just as though she is his. So I spent many years going through life and just doing life and never really just existing and never living, because I couldn't forgive myself for what I had done and the people that I had hurt. And it took years for me to even be able to admit this and to talk about this. But someone reminded me that grace, God supplies enough grace, and that it is sufficient. It was sufficient for me to remember the day that I was saved. It was sufficient enough for me to remember that I could forgive people that had hurt me, and that I could forgive myself, and that it's okay that we all have failures and we all have faults, but that God's love is much greater than that. And so in me telling all this, there isn't anybody in this room who is not exempt from that same choice that I made. And y'all have all heard stories from Ken and from Chris and from Lindsay and now from myself, and y'all have heard a great series that Chris has put together. And I pray that y'all will allow this to resonate in your heart and in your mind, and to really understand you're going to have faults and you're going to have failures. But to let Jesus be the center of your life and to live your life for him. Don't have a bad boy story resurrected. And that's not what Jesus wants out of us. When I decided to make that commitment to Jesus, my life still was full of troubles and full of trials and temptations, but there's so much more peace and so much more freedom that Jesus brings to us. And if we just allow him to, and his, it surpasses all understanding. It's absolutely beautiful to have the peace and to have the freedom and to be able to stand up here or sit here and talk to y'all and tell y'all my story. And not that it's easy, but when you make those decisions and you live a life and you do the things that I did, and you allow yourself to date people that you don't know and you don't know what they're like, then it puts you in a position to where you have choices that you have to make, and there are always consequences for our choices that we make. And I had a child that was, obviously the consequence of my actions. And so what I want to say is that, I do not believe that me getting pregnant was God's will for my life. I do believe, though, that my story has been able to help me. It has been able to help a lot of people that know my story. And I give him all the glory and the credit for that. It's not me. I wouldn't wish my situation on anybody here, but I definitely am a stronger person because of the trials and what I went through, and the understanding of forgiveness and the true understanding of love, and knowing that I am worthy. And no matter how far gone to the other side I was, he never left me. He was always there. All he was waiting was on me to make that commitment to him. And when I chose to do that, and I know that I was saved when I was 14, but I chose a very wayward life for a very long time. And I'm very thankful to be able to be here on this side of that life now, telling y'all my story.